The number one thing that I think is a concern for me about Michigan after watching that game against Oklahoma is that I sense that they have a bit of an identity issue. And that's a problem because Michigan largely has built their program since COVID, obviously, but built their program on identity. And who they are and the way that they play and their philosophy has been foremost. It hasn't been leading with talent, even though they had a really talented team win the national championship. It has been leading with philosophy and leading with identity, namely this physical, run it well, play great defense, win the line of scrimmage identity. And that was an identity that, quite frankly, fell short on Saturday night on the road against the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, we'll get to Oklahoma in a moment because there's a lot of positives to take from this if you're Oklahoma. But first, for Michigan, the identity issues leaving this game, I think, leave a lot of question marks surrounding the program and, like, where do you go from here? And specifically on the offensive side. Let's just throw out a couple of things that maybe we know now. Maybe they don't have the offensive line that we think that they have. I did not think that the offensive line played well. Now, just so that you know, I did watch the actual coach's tape of the Michigan offense against Oklahoma on Sunday, and there were a lot of glaring mistakes from the offensive line, and that's clearly not the offensive line that they had in 22 and 23, and certainly not even last year in 24. So you go into this year now and they're trying to retain the same identity, but they don't have it on the field. And I think that can be a problem. They also, by the way, they don't have the running backs and wide receivers that they did in those years. Now, they're not bad at running back, and I think that there were some glimmers of hope, namely the long run right coming out of halftime. That's a solid run. I think it's more of a concern on the outside. The talent on the outside is there. The details on the outside are not there. I'll get into that in a little bit more. And then more so than just the actual ability of, let's say, the offensive line and their physicality. I didn't love the game plan from Chip Lindsey, the new offensive coordinator. This marriage of Chip Lindsey, who is, and I'm going to try to choose my words carefully here, spread-oriented and has been maybe a bit more of, let's just call it, more finesse than Michigan has been in the past. This marriage of something like that to what Michigan wants to retain from their great run since COVID, which is this physicality up front. I found that marriage on Saturday night really didn't fit. Okay, some of the things that they did well was what they have done well for the last 4 years. Some of the things that they really struggled with were clearly new, and namely the side-to-side offense, the screen offense that you saw that has been brought from Chip Lindsey. I did not think that marriage fit well, and they're going to have to find their way of who are they going to be? Which road are they going to go down, and which philosophy are they going to major in? Because to be great on offense, you've got to major in a philosophy. You've got to major in an identity. And right now, I think that there is a bit of a tug of war with which identity is going to rule out with Michigan. And I'll just give like a word of warning, and I know Michigan fans are going to shudder at this. And I know that this man had a lot of success post Jim Harbaugh. David Shaw had good success after Jim Harbaugh. But if you really study what went on there, it slowly deteriorated from a physicality standpoint on the offensive line to the point where late in David Shaw's tenure at Stanford, post Jim Harbaugh, they were a totally finesse, pass-oriented team. Okay, so now that Jim Harbaugh has left Michigan, you're 2 years removed now. This is the second season since Jim Harbaugh left to the National Football League. And the question then for me is, can you retain that physical nature up front? Can you do it? And that's going to be the question moving forward. Let's just take it from a numbers perspective. Outside of that 75-yard run on the first play of the second half, they ran it 31 other times for 71 total yards. That's 2.3 yards per carry. That's not good enough for a team that wants to major in physicality. That's what they want. Sharon Moore wants their identity to be. They need to be better than that. Now, they can do a better job from a game plan perspective. Now, let's get into a little bit of the game plan and then the personnel. The wide receiver group right now at Michigan is a bit of an issue because they don't threaten the secondary. There's no deep threats. There's no structure of passing game that's going to force the safeties to cover deep. So when that happens, guess what the safeties get to do? Play really close to the line of scrimmage. And when they do that, you can't block them. You see, running the football, yes, it's a mentality. Yes, you've got to be physical, but it's also just a math game. It's literally just a math equation. Do they have more guys than you can block? That's it. That's it. Almost every single run pass check that a quarterback handles at the line of scrimmage is predicated on that. Numbers. That's it. And Oklahoma was not threatened at all by the wide receiver group from Michigan. Therefore, they had plus numbers in the run defensive box all night long. So the safeties were unblocked and down close near the line of scrimmage, making contact 2, 3, 4 yards down the field. Therefore, there was no room to run. No room to run. If you look at some of the Michigan teams that had a lot of success, they at least had a threat, whether it was a tight end, whether it was a wide receiver, whatever, passing game that they had when J.J. McCarthy started letting the ball loose down the field. And all of a sudden, those safeties couldn't quite get up near the line of scrimmage. And so the 3-yard run turns into a 5-yard run and a 6-yard run, which means that 2nd and 7 turns into 2nd and 4. Well, Michigan has to live in 2nd and 4, in particular with a young quarterback. So that's what was going on from a nerdy, run ratios perspective. But then it was also the game plan. So the personnel didn't threaten the defense, but also the game plan. Michigan ran so many tight sets, what I would call as bunch sets. Well, when you run bunch sets, the defense can do what? It can condense. All right. I always think of, I don't even know what they're called. You know those I don't know, they look like a mesh ball. If you're watching on YouTube right now, I'm trying to use my hands, and they go from like small, and then they can get large, and they expand, and then they can get small, and then they can expand a little bit. Almost acts like a balloon. A balloon can be small, and then it blows up, fills up with air, and it gets expanded. Well, that's how defenses work. So when you condense your set, what you do is you take the air out of the defense, and they condense down with you. Well, when that happens, all 11 players for the defense are typically within 8 to 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. Well, Michigan was doing that all night long, inviting Oklahoma down super low and then never taking a play action shot right down the field past that defense. So they were just trying to run the football into a condensed defensive set. Now, to me, that's a bit banging your head against a brick wall. You see, when you are trying to create big plays, if you're trying to create a threat or a conflict for the secondary, what you have to do is invite them to condense in order to take a shot. And then you spread them out and you expand the defense in order to run it. And Michigan didn't do that. And so from that standpoint, I thought that their game plan was, I'll just say, poor. The details on the outside were poor. There's a lot of room for improvement for Michigan. I don't think it's a panic situation yet because there's a ton of things to coach off of that film. If you're the offensive line coach, if you're the running backs coach, if you're the quarterbacks coach, whoever it is watching the film, you're going to have a different plan moving forward from Chip Lindsey. At least I hope they do. And then you're going to be able to coach a ton of detail from the wide receivers on down. All right. I thought that not having Marlon Klein was a big takeaway from them. He's clearly their number one option in the passing game, and not having him out there, again, negated any sort of threat that Oklahoma's defense would have to be aware of or have to respect. And once they didn't respect it, again, everybody up near the line of scrimmage, and then you can't run the football. The one area that they did succeed running the football was when they got back to old school Michigan. Okay, so here's what happened. Early in the game, they had 2 extra offensive linemen on the field. So they were actually playing with 7 offensive linemen. And they ran the ball okay. Now, Joel, you just told me you can't condense a set to run the football. Yes, but you can with extra offensive linemen because you're adding gaps that the defense has to be responsible for. So the safeties are no longer just extra hats in the box, but they are actually specific responsibility towards a gap in the run fit. Again, a lot of technical terms to basically tell you, if you want to condense, do it that way with extra offensive linemen. They ran it decent early a couple of times, and then the big run to start the second half. Guess how many offensive linemen they had on the field? 7. And when you have that, what do you have? Extra gaps. Oklahoma did not adjust to the extra offensive linemen. Therefore, the cutback lane was wide open, nobody there, and it ends up being a 75-yard touchdown. So if you want to run it that way. And if you want to condense with skill position players like fullbacks and tight ends, condense in order to play action and throw, and then spread out in order to run. At least that way you get the defense to expand and or declare their coverage, which makes life a lot easier for their quarterback. Now, let's get to the quarterback. That was a long discussion, and we didn't even really talk about Bryce Underwood. Let's talk about Bryce Underwood. 9 of 24 on the day, and if you just look at his stat sheet, and a lot of people are going to just look at his stat sheet, you're going to come away with that and say, Bryce Underwood didn't play well, and he's not this or that. That's not the case. I actually thought Bryce played a lot better than his stat line. The film suggests that. I want to be very clear. That does not mean he played perfect. There's a ton of room for improvement for Bryce Underwood, namely his pocket awareness, his ability to change speeds on his throws. When you got a young quarterback that has that type of physical ability and stature, a lot of times they throw a fastball every throw. All right? And playing quarterback, you've got to have what I would consider to be pitch selection. What are you throwing? You've got to be able to drive the football and throw the fastball. You've got to be able to layer the football, throw the football with touch in intermediate zones. Very difficult to do, but it's a learned skill, and it's something he'll certainly develop. And then you've got to be able to throw with touch down the field. Okay, so all of those areas are development issues. And Bryce tried to throw a lot of footballs, whether they were supposed to be layered or with touch down the field, and he threw fastballs. Okay, so his ability to change speeds, his pocket awareness, all of that's going to increase. His defensive recognition is going to increase. I'm not concerned about Bryce Underwood. In fact, in a lot of ways, I thought he was their best offensive player on the field. And as a true freshman, that's pretty remarkable. He gave me very early vibes for some of the better quarterbacks that I've seen in college football, where I'm like, okay, I see it. There are glimpses where you're like, oh my gosh, that's tough to defend. He makes a couple of different decisions, whether it's in like an RPO decision or a pitch selection decision, and big plays are going to be there. And as he gets better, I'm just telling you, I think Bryce Underwood is as advertised, regardless of stat line. You will hear a lot of really poor analysis around the country this week that Bryce Underwood is not who he says he is, and he's not the number one player, because everyone's going to just look at the stat sheet. But the film suggests otherwise. Small tweaks, small development, and it will be there. Namely, like I said, pocket awareness, and then the change of speeds. All that recognition will happen. Defense, I thought they were put in a precarious situation. I thought the defense actually played pretty well for Michigan. They forced Oklahoma into a situation where they had to run their quarterback 19 times because Michigan basically took the running backs away from the Sooners, and John Mateer had to put a cape on his back, and he did. And credit to him, and credit to Oklahoma for going that direction in that game. So I'm not concerned about the defense. The only concern I would have for the defense is that if the offense does not grow, and more specifically, if the offense does not run the football better, then the defense will be exposed to more snaps. I used to talk with Jesse Minter all the time, now the coordinator with the Chargers there with Harbaugh. And when he was at Michigan, we would have long conversation. And by the way, Mike McDonald before that. And we would have conversations about the complementary nature with which that entire program was built. And namely, it was the offense's job to limit the snaps on the defense. Not necessarily the defense's job. Now, you've got to get off the field on third down, certainly. But the offense's job was to sustain drives, convert on third down. Even if you're going to punt on that series, you get a first down or two, and now all of a sudden that defense gets to rest and clock runs, which limits the total number of snaps. If they can do that, then the defense should be fine. If the defense is exposed, then we'll see more of what we saw on Saturday. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.